Today we're going to talk about Chaturanga Dandasana. So if you have 2 blocks and a strap, that would be awesome. That will help you do some of the demonstrations that I'm going to do to help you understand your Chaturanga better. So take a second to grab those. So Chaturanga Dandasana is part of the sun salutation that we do in yoga. So if you've been to a vinyasa class, you've probably done at least 10 Chaturangas or a power flow class. And if you walk into a studio and you don't know what Chaturanga is, you're going to find yourself lost. And as a teacher, it's important for you to be able to figure out how to explain this and break it down to your students. Because it is something that we do so often, it's important that everyone does it correctly and with integrity. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about Chaturanga and its form, and then give you a couple of tips about how to properly teach this to your students within a classroom environment. So Chaturanga Dandasana is basically a tricep push-up. So in PE class when you were young, you probably learned a push-up, and typically that was a bicep push-up. So your biceps on the top of the arm, your triceps on the back of the arm. So a bicep push-up, your arms go out wide like this. With a tricep push-up, we're going to take those elbows and tuck them into the body. So it looks like this. This is a tricep push-up. So the difference is the elbows are not wide, they are tucked into your rib cage. So that's a great cue for your students. Tuck the elbows into your rib cage. So to do a Chaturanga properly, you have to have enough tricep strength to do it, as well as core strength. So sometimes you'll see students trying to do the Chaturanga, but they're not quite ready for it. Oftentimes you'll see them compensating in other muscles. Sometimes that looks like this crunching up in the ears. Sometimes this looks like this dip in the low back, and then they'll kind of get down halfway and go, ugh, and just collapse onto their stomach. So you really want to avoid that collapse in the stomach, that bending in the low back, and that crunching in the shoulders, because when your muscles are compensating for the tricep and the core that are supposed to be doing the work, you're putting too much stress and strain on those areas, and it might cause them pain the next day. So you really want to encourage your students to use the tricep and the core strength, and until they can get to that full high plank to low plank, there are a few options to get there. So my first recommendation, if you're teaching in a class and you don't have time to break it down for a student, a great option is to do the knees, chest, chin variation. That's Chaturanga Dandasana. It means 8 pointed pose. So the points are your toes, that's 2, your knees, that's 4, your hands, that's 6, your chest and your chin, that's 8. So when you have your students step back to a plank and you tell them knees, chest, chin, I like to rock forward on the toes. Exhale, drop the knees, the chest, and the chin. So when you do that, the tailbone is going to stay sticking up. So that can be hard for students. Sometimes they just come all the way down onto their belly. So I say dropping the knees, the chest, the chin, keep the tailbone lifted. And then you inhale, pull the heart through for Bhujangasana. So that's a good way to get them through that flow without causing too much or asking too much of their triceps and their core strength by dropping the knees, the chest, the chin. That's one option. The other option is to do a low plank Chaturanga. So this is a great place to start if someone really wants to build that tricep strength. So here's tabletop. There's a difference between tabletop and low plank. So watch my hips shift forward. Shoulders are stacked over the wrist. From my knees to my shoulders, I'm creating this line. So for Chaturanga, the elbows hinge back. So sometimes you're not quite far forward enough. So you need to have the students kind of lift the toes and rock forward on the knees. And then you hinge the elbows back, rock the shoulders forward. So someone who's still building tricep strength might not be able to get down to that 90-degree angle. So I always suggest taking little baby Chaturangas, using the tricep strength until you can get down to that 90 degrees. So let's talk about that 90 degrees. So in a traditional vinyasa practice, I'm thinking specifically Ashtanga. If you ever see them do their Chaturangas, they do this really kind of pretty swoop through Chaturanga. Now it's really pretty, And it might be something that you do in your practice, it might be something that you do your entire life in your practice, and you're fine. However, yoga tends to attract a lot of hypermobile people, so super flexible people. And when you have super flexible muscles, that puts your joints at a little bit more of a risk. So I happen to be hypermobile. Here's a good example. So this is my elbow at neutral. This is my elbow hyperextended. Do you see how it's bending past neutral? So because of that, because I hyperextend and because a lot of students hyperextend because it attracts those flexible students, we've got to really make sure that they're protecting their joints. They're creating that strength and flexibility of the muscles to provide stability for the joints. So when you do Chaturanga, I'm just going to do it from the side, you want to have the students stop at 90 degrees. That's just a more stable joint rather than taking the shoulders past the elbows like this. And that's what that swoop through kind of requires, is that bend. And it's just a little weirder on the shoulders. Now again, you might have a student, or you might prefer to do that swoop through and feel totally fine. That's, it's your own practice. You can do what you'd like. However, as a teacher, I like to teach on the error of the side of caution. So if you have hypermobile joints, if a student has hypermobile joints, which a lot of them do, always just suggest that 90-degree angle. So I just sort of blanket statement, 90 degrees is your Chaturanga. So when you find that 90 degrees, so when you're working on that low plank Chaturanga and you finally get to that 90 degrees, you have the strength to do that 90 degrees, then you or your student can work on doing the high plank version. So high plank variation would be rocking forward on the toes, hinging the elbows back, shoulders forward, 90 degrees, and then pulling the heart through for up dog. So you just really want to stress that 90 degrees rather than having them go past the 90 degrees because they're doing that swoop through. Or, again, what happens is some people go down and they just collapse. And if you're collapsing onto your belly like that, you're really not using the strength of your triceps then. What you're doing is you're letting gravity take you down, and that's really missing the point. The point is we're building that strength in the triceps and core. So it's better to do above 90 or 90 than it is to just go all the way down onto the belly, unless you're doing that knees, chest, chin version. So a couple of ways to help your students find that 90 degrees. Really amazing way to do it is with a strap. So you take a strap, usually these straps have these two little rings on them. So you want to take the end of the strap, create this loop, so you bring it through both rings, and then you come back over the top ring and under the second ring, creating this loop. So then you can just kind of pull it and it gets tight. So you're going to make the loop about shoulder width distance. So the student is just going to take the strap onto their forearms and check it out. So it might even need to be just a little bit wider than shoulder width distance. So having the student do this can really help you to find the shoulder width. And then you want to make sure that that metal strap part isn't pressing against the arm, preferably bringing it kind of to the bottom. Good. So from here, we're going to bring the strap just above the elbow. So when you do your Chaturanga, it's going to be sitting against the bottom ribs. So just kind of try that out by bringing the elbows down like you're doing a Chaturanga, and just make sure that's sitting at a good spot. So if you needed to make them a little wider, the strap a little wider, you can. So to do this, you're going to find your low or high plank, depending on where you want to practice from. Spreading the fingers wide, shoulders are stacked over the wrist. Take an inhale, and then on your exhale, you rock forward, hinging the elbows back. And that strap is going to stop you. So your shoulders are going to be right at that 90 degrees. You can try lifting the knees for high plank if you want to try it there. And you feel pretty solid here. This helps you understand and feel the 90 degrees. It still takes some strength to hold here, but it's a little bit more support. And the student and yourself can feel 90 degrees here. All right. So another great way to help your students find that 90 degrees is to take the blocks, the highest height, shoulder width distance at the top of the mat. So from here, you take your finger, your hands in the shape of an L, your pointer finger comes to the bottom outside corner, and then you spread your fingers wide. Good, so maybe a little bit narrower. And then you come into that high or low plank. You hinge forward, bend the elbows back, and then those shoulders just come right down on top of the blocks. So you're at this 90 degrees. You can try, if they're still building that strength, coming into the high plank version. Something else fun to have your students do is try lifting an arm. Woo, that really works that core strength. Lifting the other arm, maybe lifting both and not falling out. Good. So those are two really great ways to use your props to help your students understand Chaturanga. One more thing I'm going to go over is that transition from Chaturanga to up dog or cobra. So depending on that variation of the Chaturanga you're doing, you can transition into cobra or up dog. So let's say we're doing that knees, chest, chin, that Chaturanga Dandasana. So you rock forward, dropping the knees, the chest, the chin. And from here, you tuck the tailbone, pull the heart through, tops of the feet to the mat, Bhujangasana. So that's cobra pose. And then from this low plank, you would find Chaturanga Dandasana. You can either then have your students drop the legs, the belly, the chest, and pull the heart through for cobra. Or you do this low plank Chaturanga, and then tops of the feet to the mat, straighten the legs, lift the quads, pull the heart through up dog. Good. And then lastly, if you're doing this high plank variation, you rock forward, Chaturanga. You can drop the knees, the legs, the belly, the chest, pull the heart through, cobra. Or high plank, Chaturanga. Inhale, pull the heart through. You don't even let the legs drop at all, just the tops of the feet for up dog. Transitioning into down dog. Great. So I hope that helped you understand Chaturanga a little bit better yourself, and also give you some tips on how to teach that Chaturanga and all the different variations to your students.